What's up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, we're going to be talking about my personal and very biased opinion on prison reform. I am in no way an expert on this topic or in my field. I am 8 weeks away from a bachelor's degree in criminal program support services and psychology, but I in no way, shape, or form think I am an expert on this topic whatsoever. I'm just a chick with a camera that went to prison and is now studying to go back into prison to help offenders. But again, I'm not an expert. This is my own personal opinion with my own experience in and outside of prison. And everything that I'm going to share today, honestly, has taken me years to even think about. While I was serving time in prison, I looked around and everyone around me was broken and hurt and miserable and habitual, which means they have been to prison before. More often than not, of course, there are always first timers, but we're gonna talk about what I personally, myself, just my opinion, what I think about when I think about prison reform and how I think that we can dramatically reduce the number of people incarcerated, as well as help curb drug addiction. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. As of 2016, it was estimated that 2.3 million Americans were serving time in jail or prison. In 2008, it was estimated that we had 24.7% of the world's population of prisoners. And in the world, we have 9.8 million Americans, roughly, in jails and prisons. So for America to hold 24.7% of the world's population of prisoners, that is extreme. We incarcerate more citizens per capita than any other country in the world. I think we have a lot of things wrong. Of course, America has a lot of things right, and I'm very grateful to live here. But we need to understand that we're doing a lot of things wrong, and we need to understand how to fix a lot of core problems that we have as a country, and we need to do that together. Incarceration is the main form of punishment and rehabilitation. Prison, parole, and probation cost $81 billion annually. Billion, with a B. Laws adopted in the 1980s are what fills our prisons today, restricting and regulating and criminalizing all substances to the point where we have made average, normal, hate those words, people, we've made them criminals. We've taken our most vulnerable and put them in prison. 20% of all inmates have a serious mental illness, and they are categorized differently. In 2017, 54.7% of all inmates had psychological distress, and 63% of all offenders had a history of mental health issues. We are putting our most vulnerable people in prisons. Now, if you were to ask 10 people that you saw just at the mall, if you said, who do you think goes to prison? Usually, people would tell you violent offenders, murderers, rapists, people that are a danger to society. And while, yes, that is true, that only makes up half of the inmate population. Half of all inmates are non-violent drug offenders. And the most common drug crime is possession of drugs. That sends you to prison. There's a lot of criticism about ending the war on drugs, and I have a lot of opinions about that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because if half of all incarcerated citizens in our country are serving time on a non-violent drug offense, that leads us to believe we have a public health safety issue. We have a mental health issue. We have a drug substance abuse issue on our hands. And if we eliminate half of all of those offenders, do you have any idea how much money would be left allocated to drug treatment centers? So let's just talk about the war on drugs just for a second, and then we'll go back to prison reform. They go hand in hand here. I can't talk about one without talking about the other. America's drug laws are irrational. They are so restricted and they are so controlling. And if you attempt to control a population, then they will just lash out. If you tell someone that they cannot drink alcohol, they cannot make alcohol, they cannot produce alcohol, they will find ways to make, produce, and consume alcohol. We saw that in Prohibition. So why do we think that restricting and criminalizing and controlling people that have free will and this is a freedom, this is a free country, why do we think it's okay that we should tell them what they can and cannot do with their bodies? So much so that every time that anyone is caught with a substance that they are ingesting in their own body, they go to prison. Now, I'm not saying that decriminalizing all drugs is the answer. I think that America is so against that as a whole. I think that is way too radical for Americans to buy into at this moment in time. Do I think it should happen? Yes. We cannot incarcerate our way out of our drug problem. We have to educate our way out. We tried in the 60s and 70s to demonize marijuana. How well did that work? How well did it work to make our kids believe it was the devil's lettuce? Now everyone says that as a fucking joke because it is. The devil's lettuce, as it turns out, has been an amazing help to mental health patients, people with PTSD, people that are truly suffering, people with cancer. Marijuana has amazing benefits. CBD also has amazing benefits, and it has been proven to help so many different illnesses across the board. And it's crazy that just now in 2020, we only have a few states that have legalized marijuana. We are so far behind the times, and we are so far behind where we need to be. America should be the example to the rest of the world on how we function, how we treat our people. And if you're asking me, you judge a country by how they treat their most vulnerable. That's how you judge a country. How are they treating their veterans? How are they treating people with mental health? How are they treating drug addicts? How are they treating senior citizens? If you look at that, how they're treating their most vulnerable, that will tell you an awful lot about that society. The war on drugs will never end. The war on drugs will never end. We keep trying to cut off the supply as if the demand is going to somehow diminish if there's no supply. But Economics 101 has taught us if there is a demand, there will always be a supply. If you cut off one supply, 10 more will come back. You build a wall, we're going to build more tunnels. It's amazing what people will think of to break the law. The higher the risk, the greater the reward. That is why people are smuggling drugs into this country. That is why people are selling drugs even though they know they can go to prison. I am proof of that. I did that. A lot of people fall victim to selling a couple of things here and there. Maybe it's their prescription, and then they go to jail or they go to prison for selling their prescription medication. I've seen that happen because they needed to make a few extra bucks. I've seen people in prison for smuggling weed across the border. I've seen people in prison for minor drug possession. There will always be a demand to escape the reality or the pain or whatever it is people are going through. There will always be a demand for drugs. Just like there will always be a supply for those drugs. But the more we restrict them, the more we control our society, the less likely we are to win the war on drugs, which is ridiculous that they even call it that, because you can't wage a war on an inanimate object. You're waging war on the people. You're waging war on are most vulnerable. Let's get back to prison reform. It is my personal opinion that drug addicts have no place in prison. And it is also my opinion that prison is a very necessary part of our society. It is so important that we lock up dangerous offenders, people that could hurt you, people that have raped people, people that have killed other people. It is so important that we lock up violent and dangerous criminals. Now, I just said drug addicts do not belong in prison. However, this is also a layered problem. Do I think that a person on drugs that has hurt another person qualifies for a treatment center? I don't know. There will always be people that fall into the middle of that. Someone that is a drug addict that was also a violent person, that has also done a violent crime. There is always going to be that gray area where it should be up to regulators, judges, it should be up to that state to determine, are you a drug addict that is not a danger to society, a danger to anyone else, meaning you've never committed a violent crime, or are you a dangerous, violent person that needs to go to prison? And I think the people that are in prison can benefit from classes, drug treatment programs. I think that has a value in prison. But again, I think those violent offenders that we cannot have in a stable and safe society, I think prison is good for them. But this is very complex, and I know this is a very sensitive topic. So Right now, what we can do to help curb recidivism today without changing any drug laws is the minute someone comes into prison, we are focused on rehabilitating them and re-entering them into society. Re-entry class in prison is a very like checking off a box kind of thing that you do at the end of your prison sentence. That is wrong. That is wrong. So if I do 2.5 years, which I did, say I did 2.5 years, and then you give me a 30-day reentry class right before I go home, and you tell me that I have to pay my bills and report to parole, that's not helping anyone. Reentry needs to be a complete, like from day one, from intake on throughout your entire sentence, re-entry needs to be on the forefront of everyone's mind. How is this person, how is Jessica going to leave prison and be an active member of society? And another thing that I think is so important is that we implement a job training and a job placement program, not for 50 inmates a facility, for as many people as we can. For everyone that has a parole date, we need to be working with the society. Prison and society are very blockade. They're very against each other, you know? Society says, go take these criminals over here and keep them away from us. And prison's like, cool, I got you. They're two completely separate things. They need to work together. We need to come together to solve and curb recidivism. So if we implemented a massive job training and job placement program, and we got employers and companies in our society to work with the prison, and we trained inmates on how to do this job, and then we hire them, the place hires them after they get out of prison, that helps so many people. And it's very easy for people to say, well, don't break the law if you don't want to go to prison. Very easy to say that. But the reason why you as a tax-paying member of society should care what happens to these people is because they are releasing broken, unstable, miserable people that have been treated like animals into your society. So do you want Jessica, a caged up animal, a beaten and abused and broken drug addict, to hit the street when I get out of prison? Or do you want Jessica, the rehabilitated addict in recovery, the mother, the student, the now YouTuber helping people? Do you want that Jessica? Because I could show you a completely different Jessica if I didn't change my life. So which one would you rather live next to? Jessica today or Jessica 10 years ago? That was a drug dealer, that was broken, that was using drugs, that was fighting with people all the time. Do you want that Jessica living next door? I sure as hell don't. So if you do not want to change the drug laws, I highly recommend job training and job placement programs. If you don't want to see addicts as human beings, that's where we start. If we decriminalize all drugs and we only lock up violent offenders, that will eliminate half of the inmate population, and that will allocate billions of dollars that we could spend on treatment and that we could spend on job training and job placement. There is money there that we can reallocate to better help the offenders. We just have to figure out how to do that. And it's going to piss people off at first because changing the system is always gonna upset people, but it's important. It is important that we do that for the greater good. The only thing prison does right now is cause PTSD, broken families, it hurts people, and yes, these people broke the law, I understand, I get it. Prison needs to be in place to keep a society safe. However, when that prison is sexually assaulting women, when that prison is allowing women to give birth alone in dirty jail cells, when that prison is overrun by drugs and weapons and cell phones, when prison guards get away with murdering inmates, it's swept under the rug, who are the real criminals? I want to talk a little bit about mental health after prison. Some people do receive treatment in prison for their mental illness. And then after they get out of prison, they don't have insurance and they can't afford that medication. So how are we taking care of them? Prisons have become the modern day mental hospitals, except it is nothing but torture. Ironically, the worst thing you can do to another human is leave them alone. Humans are social beings. So when you put a human alone in a dark room or a room that's lit 24/7, goes back and forth. A lot of facilities use light deprivation to make you crazy. When you put an individual alone in a cell and all they hear is the screams of other people, the howls of other people in pain and hurting, and the only human interaction you get is 3 times a day when someone gives you a tray through a little tiny slot in your door, it would make anyone go insane. I've seen the strongest people break under those conditions. And for everyone that has ever judged people going to prison, I challenge you to lock yourself in a bathroom for 24 hours, and 3 times during that 24 hours, someone gives you food and locks the door real quick. Do that for 24 hours. No phone, no windows, no lights, and see if you would be okay. The less inmates we have, the more money we have to help offenders. However, when you have private prisons profiting off the number of bodies that are in that facility, how are we going to change that? There's corruption at every level, county, state, and federal level. There's corruption all throughout the prison system. It is a monster right now. And I don't think this video is going to make a difference. I don't think we're going to see any real impact on prison reform for a really long time, and that makes me very sad. If we start to see addiction as a public health safety issue, if we start to view addicts as people that need help, we might be able to change how this prison system is by default. By default, there will be less people there. And yes, violent offenders need to go to prison, and there will always be people that just don't want the help and that refuse the help. There will be people that go through a treatment program and relapse or break the law again. There will be those people. But we have to do our absolute best to help the people that want it, get people off of the streets, save lives, and do our absolute best to create a better, healthier, happier society. The prison system has built a vacuum where young kids are seeing their parents in prison and they're falling trapped, they're falling victim to the prison system. And once you make one mistake, you're forever labeled a felon. You're forever have obstacles and barriers against you and society. All we do is disconnect people from society, and then we beat them when they're down and we tell them, you shouldn't have broken the law. Thanks a lot, Karen. That's not helping. That is not, I'm sorry if your name's Karen. That's not helping. So is the prison system helping or hurting our society? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I could make so many videos on this topic, but I think we need to completely rethink how we view prison, rethink how we view drug addiction, and take a really good, hard, ugly look in the mirror, and as a society come together to figure out how we got it so wrong. And together, we need to come together, be less judgmental, be less shitty to each other, and figure out a bipartisan way to change the prison system. At the end of the day, it affects all of us. It affects our society, our communities, our taxes. It affects all of us. We should want healthy, rehabilitated, happy people leaving prison, not broken, not abused, not humiliated, but rehabilitated and ready and excited to come home and work a job and be there for their family and rise from their own ashes. I'm gonna end today's video here. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay sober. Please do not break the law, and I'll see you guys in my next one.